Here voting.
And Roger St. Amand. Okay, Jennifer Bonilla. Gary Burr.
Here, not voting.
Tom Reeve.
Here, I guess I'll vote.
Aaron Brown.
Here, I believe I'm voting too.
All right. Tammy Tripler. All right, and I don't think we have anyone. I'm just going to quickly scroll through from the outer islands.
Heather,
Yes.
Gary, I'll vote since Tom's not.
Okay. Okay. Great. Thank you, everybody. A voucher has gone around, so hopefully everybody has seen that and been able to sign off on that. And then public comment. If you are a member of the public and you would like to make public comment, what is it, Josh? Raise their hand and you'll allow them to speak.
Yes.
Okay. So public comment is open.
Oh, I found a little boy.
Seeing nothing, I will move on. I do just want to say, people, to try and keep yourselves muted, just because there's some background noise. But then obviously, if you go to speak, you got to unmute. Remember to unmute yourself. I will take approval of the minutes of March 30, 2021.
So moved. This is
That-
Jessica.
Okay. Is there a
Second, John Lynch.
Thank you, John. Are there any questions, comments, changes? All right, and Mark, am I allowed to do the verbal?
Yeah, I think Ingrid, she teed it up really well for you. You can use that. It works.
Yeah. All right. So everybody get yourselves unmuted. That's voting. And if those in favor, aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. All right. The minutes of March 30, 2021 have been unanimously approved. And Mark, I will turn it over to you for reports and updates.
Thanks, Heather. I appreciate that. Well, I hope everybody's enjoying a little bit of the warmth we're getting as spring rolls on. And that's probably a good segue into travel guidance. And we've got a lot of things coming up. So I am aware of a lot of the positivity that people are feeling about access to vaccines, about just the steps we're taking. It's been a really tough year. We all know that. But I think there's a lot of encouragement. A lot of people are feeling really good about where we've been, where we've come from, and more importantly, where we're going. I just want to underscore the importance of us all working together as a community to keep our schools open. I think many of you know across our nation, we've been blessed when we look at our schools. Certainly there's a lot of schools that have not even opened yet in some parts of the country, or for whatever reasons, they may not have the resources or the supports that we're so very blessed to have. The amazing partnerships we have with the task force, the Down East Task Force, the hospital, all those entities. But we have seen as in the past few days, our schools are getting hit with COVID, or the impact of COVID. It is alive and well. It is with us. Our staff, our schools have done an amazing job trying to navigate this, but we can't do it alone. And we also know that our schools are safe. And when we do have events, it's typically from an event that may emanate from the community. And that's part of the deal. But it underscores the fact that as we go into our April break, it is really important that we continue to do the basic things that we know are going to prevent COVID. Wear a mask, physically distance, avoid unnecessary travel. And unnecessary travel means if it's not something that's medically needed or something that a loved one's in danger, we really should avoid that travel. The schools can't mandate that. All we can do is recommend. But the Maine CDC and government officials, they recommend avoiding unnecessary travel. And we're close to being in the final stretch of this school year, and we want to end in a positive note. And we want to bring as much normalcy back in our celebrations for our student achievements, so that folks can come and attend events. But we're going to need the support of the community to be able to do that. So going into this break, I hope we can do it safely. I hope we can do it collectively. And I will be putting out some recommendations or guidance. It'll be on the website if anybody has any questions. We would ask or request that families that do travel, if they need to travel, please work with our schools, nurses, and our principals so that we can navigate that. I just want to also, John brought up, and that's really important for folks to know, coming back in the fall, all students will need to be immunized. And I'm not talking about COVID, I'm talking about all required immunizations. There will be no exemptions, and that will include students who are homeschooled if they want to participate in any programs or activities, athletics or anything of that nature. That will be a requirement. And so that exemption that previously existed will no longer be in effect for the coming fall. I've been asked about data in terms of vaccinations, and in short, I really can't give you an exact percentage because I can't ask staff who has been vaccinated or who hasn't, but I'm reasonably confident in telling you and trying to drill down a little bit. We're encouraging staff to confidentially tell our nurses if they've informed them if they've been vaccinated. We don't need to know who, we just need to know the number so we can report that out. So I hope to be able to share some more information with you soon on that. The next piece I'd like to talk about is rather unfortunate, and it saddens me. If you're not, well, I'll start with this. I'm very proud of our kids and our staff and what they've done to really help us educate our community and fight COVID. You may have seen the posters that have gone up around our communities, and it stretches the spectrum of our student body, and they've been amazing, and proud of our kids. What I'm not proud of is how somebody could take something so positive, something so student driven and student led, and in an instant, in a cowardly instant, attack that and deface it and defile it. That is just so below the belt. It's sad. And so we are working with law enforcement to try to drill down to see if we can determine how that happened, but we did have some of our posters defiled. I hope we come back bigger and better from that, and allow our students to continue to do the things that they do so proudly to help educate our communities. That is not representative of who we are as communities, as individuals. And I know that the majority of folks stand solidly behind our students and our efforts to keep safe. The end of the year is rapidly approaching, and the end of the student year is projected to be the 10th of June, which is a Thursday. The board knows that the Commissioner of Education did waive the requirement for student days. So we've used 2 storm or contingency days. This has been an extraordinary year, an extraordinary time for our kids, our families, our staff. And I will be recommending that the 2 days for staff, that staff end the day after our students, and that our support staff also end with all staff as well. So that target date would be the 11th of June, Friday. Vaccinations and asymptomatic testing. We've been very blessed with our support for that resource, but based upon guidance and recommendations from medical experts, we're going to go into a hiatus from that. Simply put, with the majority of our staff, or if not all, being vaccinated, it's just not a valid metric to continue to employ at this time. However, should we see a spike, should we need to revisit or reinstitute that, we will. And I remain committed to the funding for next year for asymptomatic testing. We do not know what the variants will or won't do. We don't know what the impact of vaccinations in our communities will or will not be. And so I think we need to have that resource and that tool available. Certainly, we will not deploy it or use it if it's not necessary, but it is a good tool to have, and it's been very, very powerful for us to move forward. I mentioned we're seeing a lot of closures. We've had some spikes in our schools. Our principals and nurses and staff are managing that well, but I think it is a testament, and you know, when you see Trenton School and you see Bar Harbor and you see more than one of our schools seeing some potential spikes, we need to be paying attention to that to avoid wholesale school closures. And we're seeing that in Hancock County and around the state. So again, caution should be the order of the day. You'll start to see very quickly some information flowing outward. Principals are actively working with their staff on promotional ceremonies, graduations, and so much more information will follow the April break. And it is our goal. We fully intend to have as many individuals as we can attend these events safely, but we will be requiring masking and physical distancing and all of those things that have kept us safe to date. That's not something that will be a choice. It's not something that will be negotiable. It'll be a requirement. And I was very pleased with Mr. Dow and his leadership and the ADs and the principals saying, you know, if we're at an event and we have an individual not complying, we'll stop play. If we need to cease the activity, we'll do that. We don't want to do that. We just want everybody to know that there are things that we all have to do to keep our kids safe and each other safe. And the final piece of information I have for my report is the insurance rates. And we were very fortunate to not see an increase in our insurance ratings this year. And really proud of that because I think it underscores that we made some decisions a few years ago about single rate. I think that has paid dividends literally and figuratively down the road. It also, you know, I can't say that it is directly impacted by wellness, but I don't believe that's hurt us. And I believe that will pay dividends down the road. We monitor this information carefully and closely, and with the board, we did make the adjustment from our initial placeholder of 10% to 8%. Wise decision. We felt comfortable with that. Nancy and I would recommend that boards consider, and this is obviously going to be up to local boards, and each community has to navigate this differently, but we would recommend, even without that increase, that a minimum of 4% be maintained in those accounts so as to be able to navigate plan changes, hirings, and the like. And also, I think it's, you know, it's public knowledge, we're still in negotiations with all of our staff. So we believe that would be the prudent recommendation. And I'm pleased to take any questions, Heather.
If there's any questions, if you all will just click the raise your hand icon, I will utilize the list to call on anyone. Carrie.
Mark, when you talked about the vaccinations that are required for students in the upcoming year, is the COVID vaccine part of that?
It's a great question, Carrie. And the short answer is my understanding is the vaccine has now become available for students under the age of 18. I think it's the 16 to 18 range. So I'll continue to work with both DOE and local officials to see what the availability is going to be. But I think even as we're trending, I don't see it likely that our very young students may have that by the fall, but we're going to stay right on top of that and be able to report that not only to the board, but our communities. We don't want anybody blindsided with that. What we do want to do, though, on that note, is be able to provide families and students that may wish to receive the vaccine the opportunity to do so. And I have a link that I'll be sharing. So I'll keep you posted on the information.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I have Christine next.
That'd be a really dumb question, but with this vaccine mandate, is staff required to have all of the required vaccinations, or is this only apply to students? You have a teacher who was never vaccinated, or a student teacher, will they have to be vaccinated?
It's a good question, Christy. In short, I'm not, right off the top, I'm not sure the requirement for vaccinations of staff or immunizations for those other communicable diseases, but I'll research that with the nurses. Again, I know you didn't ask this question, but we have not required the COVID vaccine. We've encouraged, and my understanding is most people have taken advantage of that, but I'll follow up on the other piece.
I have Jessica and John. I see your hand too.
Well, part of mine was answered, but then my second part is like, let's say that over the summer, the age gets lowered to 10 or 12, which I think is likely with the Pfizer vaccine trials. Will we make a real effort to get that younger group populated? Like, will people be sort of every person for themselves getting their kids vaccinated, or will the school try to sponsor some way to help people get that happening?
I'm committed, Jessica, to working over the summer with local health agencies and do whatever we can do to support bringing that resource to our kids and our communities.
All right.
It's going to be a busy summer.
I have John Eisenhower. Oh, no, you're good. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Mark, and thank you everyone for your questions. Sorry, I just completely minimized my screen. Mark, should we move on to the crisis team presentation?
Please, and thank you, Heather. I'm pleased that we have Josh, we have Michelle. Yes, I see Michelle, and we have Edie Dubois. And just by way of introduction, board members probably know, but Michelle is the director of guidance at the high school. Edie is a social worker in Bar Harbor and also available through the district. And so the crisis team works as a group to support social, emotional welfare and health of our students. And we've been getting a lot of questions on that, not just from staff and parents. And I thought it would be a good opportunity, or actually board members have asked, that could we get some updates or information on what we are doing, where we're at. And so Edie and Michelle have put together about a 10, 15-minute presentation for you, and we can do some follow-up on questions. So thank you in advance, Michelle and Edie.
Thank you. We're happy to be here.
Okay, so Josh, are you going to run the slide, or do you want me to do it?
I'll run the slideshow. Tell me when to move on to the next one.
Okay, so welcome all and thank you. It's really nice to see a bunch of you guys. I haven't seen you and it feels like a long time, but it's nice to see you and welcome. So Edie and I, as Mark said, are also part of the school and the AOS crisis team. So just know that anytime we meet periodically, and anytime there is a crisis, or even if there isn't, we get together periodically and talk about issues, things we're doing, how can we work together, any problems that need resolving. We work together as a team and reach out. So if somebody in another school has an issue, we feel free to call each other back and forth and get support that way as well. So Mark asked us to talk about social emotional wellness, which is a big thing right now, especially with the way that COVID's happened and students having to be at home and staff. It's been difficult for both students and staff and parents. And so we're going to do a brief presentation. And then if you have a couple of questions afterwards, and if not, you've got more questions, our information is there, and please feel free to reach out at any time. So social emotional wellness, Edie, take it away. Go,
All
Josh.
right. Thank you. Josh, if you could go to the next slide. So who we are, we have school counselors, we have school social workers, that's myself and also Michelle. We have school psychologists, 2 of those, and we have school nurses. And if you could go ahead, Josh. And I'll just tell you briefly a little bit about what each one of us do. And some of our roles do overlap. So the school counselors, they go into classes, and they also do short-term counseling, conflict resolution, anything from civil rights. I'm doing a unit now on suicide prevention education. We have education about career aspirations, social skills groups, and we also do specific groups that are targeted at grief and loss, and also, of course, coordination with families and consultation with staff. Next. And a social worker, again, that's what I am at LCSW as well as Michelle, and we do overlap. We're both in the classes, we both see students individually. Social workers can also provide a diagnosis for students, and that can sometimes help with accessing services. I also do advocacy work on behalf of families with housing, getting them hooked up with main care or other insurances. And I also, for the school district, am in charge of the McKinney-Vento process. That is about, it's a federal program, but for homeless students that are considered homeless. And we also do case management. Okay, next. And the school psychologists, they do a lot of our evaluations on students. I won't read this whole slide, but they also, just briefly what they do, a lot of the initial and triennial testing and assessments, rating scales. They also do our more in-depth risk and threat assessments if needed. They do something called functional behavior assessments and behavior intervention plans. They generally do not see students one-on-one or weekly like I would or a school counselor. They may, if they have time at certain times, be able to see families for consultation. Next. And school nurses. They're often the front line of care, especially this year. They also see students frequently that may have non-medical issues. They often triage to us, and they work with the family, and if needed, refer to the school's mental health staff. Next slide. And I just want to go over what mental health is, because it can mean different things for different people. But it's just the upkeep of the thriving mental and emotional functioning. It also is in line with the development of the brain. It includes mood, energy level, ability to think clearly, follow through with daily living, and develop relationships and have resiliency to life's sort of ups and downs. And sleep and nutrition are very, very important pieces of this. Next. So one of the biggest buffers for students during challenging times are caring relationships with adults, and the healing happens within that relationship. And I just think that's a very, very important quote for us to all remember, which I think we do a great job of that at AOS 91. Next slide. And how did we support students this year? We provided a safe, structured, and nurturing environment during these unstable times. That includes in-person students as well as virtual academy. We also continue, myself personally, I can continue to see 15 to 20 students per week. This can fluctuate depending on what is needed to meet the needs of the students. We also have had increased outdoor time with increased screen usage time. The students' outdoor time in general has been decreasing over the years, and I think we have done a really good job of trying to increase their outdoor time this year. And our care of our students corresponds with AOS 91 mission statement. Next slide. And social emotional learning, we hear a lot about this term, and I just briefly wanted to go over what does that mean? It involves self-management, self-awareness, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness. Next slide. I'm just going to briefly go over one of our social emotional learning programs, and that's called Mind Up. And that was district-wide, a K-8 curriculum that teaches self-regulation through mindfulness-based lessons. It definitely involves education about the brain, includes various activities that help identify senses and feelings, and teaches the students how to respond reflectively rather than a quick reactive reaction. Next slide. And the referral process here, there's multiple pathways, which I think helps to meet the needs of the students. A parent can refer, a teacher, a student themselves can want to see one of us, or administrators. School counselors generally see students short-term, and then if they need to refer to an outside counselor, they can do that. Next slide. Contractees, we've had these for many years. This is a contract that goes to the superintendent's office, and this is a contract with independently licensed counselors. They could be an LCSW or an LCPC, which is a licensed clinical professional counselor. And they work within our schools. This year, though, it's mostly done virtually. And we have currently 5 contractees and 1 with an agency. And this also allows them to see the student in school, which can be a benefit, which I'll talk about in the next slide. Most contractees, though, do bill either the family's insurance or main care. So it's really not much of a cost to the school. Occasionally, the school may sponsor 1 or 2 students, but generally it's through insurance or main care. Next slide. So considerations for in-school counseling. I just wanted to make this one clear as well. While mental health services may happen at school, AOS 91 is not a mental health agency or facility. So, and the benefits of in-school counseling are that it can eliminate transportation barriers. It may be a space where the student is more comfortable, and we know that the service can happen. The risks of providing in-school counseling as you would in private practice or a mental health agency may include some dysregulation of the student upon return to class, or a resistance to really delve deep into meaningful treatment. And some examples of where counseling may be better served outside of a school setting would involve complex trauma, sexual abuse, eating disorders, self-injurious behaviors, gender identity. And families may just have a discomfort of having counseling in a school setting and prefer to go to a provider in the community. Next slide. Oh, this is on to Michelle, and I just have one more thing to say about our referral process. Unlike other years, we now have the capacity to have referrals go to other communities such as Portland or Bangor because of the virtual nature, which also helps to meet the needs of our students. All right, I'm handing it over to Michelle.
Great, thanks, Edie. And I also want to mention, even though Edie and I hold the same licensures, I also have my K-8 guidance certification, and I don't do as much one-on-one counseling as Edie does as the social worker in the position. We have Basil Steele, who's our school social worker, school counselor, who sees students for several sessions, and currently he'll see students longer because it's harder right now to find outside counselors. People were very full for a long time right now with COVID. But that's what he does mostly as well. So I want to talk about what we've done for the staff, because where the students also have needs and have gotten hit hard by COVID, so have the adults in our buildings. And it's important to remember that. So at the high school level, we offered a weekly support group to any staff member that needed it for 10 weeks, and she volunteered it. And then I took money out of our guidance budget for counseling and added another 10 more weeks because staff wanted to continue that. And I had anywhere from 5 to 8 staff weekly, and we let them have that time. Basil Steele is also available for any district staff that want to meet with him for a couple of sessions and then get referred out if you need be. Sometimes adults just need a sane voice in the system. We have an EAP program that offers free counseling, referrals to providers in the area, referrals to help with everything from like childcare to will writing to anything that you need for supports. We have the Virgin Pulse Mindfulness Series that's open to all staff through our insurance. We also had about 45 staff trained with Lana Penley for social emotional wellness that we can share with other staff or students. We have wellness activities, yoga, daily plank challenges, healthy eating. The main DOE also does a Supporting Maine Educators Forum to boost our mental health. Chris McLaughlin from Acadia also offers programming monthly for anybody that's interested about any kind of social emotional stuff or working with students. Next slide, please, Josh. So the MEA through the school, you can do any of these sessions, all free, ways to decrease stress, improve mental health, all open to staff, free of charge. Next slide, Josh. Trying to keep it in the 15 minutes, time frame. So Laura Penley said, in order to truly reform schools, we must address educators' stress. She does the mind flow. They have a laser-like focus on the adults, and modern school is a place of calm, peace, and well-being for everyone, including the educators. One of the best things Matt ever told me that I've taken to heart is that you can't meet chaos with chaos. You have to meet chaos with calm. We're the adults. We need to keep it together because the kids are coming in, parents are stressed out, kids are stressed out. We need to provide that safe haven for everybody and keep school in a daily regime, and they know what's going on. Next slide, please, Josh. The Maine DOE has a frontline warm line for Maine's essential workers, but it also will offer to school staff during COVID-19. They can call and have somebody to talk to 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., 7 days a week, or text. You will get a trained volunteer to just talk to about these things. This is not a crisis line. If you're in crisis, please call 911 or let one of us know. But it's just another person in a way that the Maine Department of Ed is trying to support educators or adults. Next slide, Josh, please. So crisis line, there's a peer support warm line, so the kids can use that. It's staffed by students 18 to 24 that can speak to students if they want to call and just have somebody to talk to for supports. There's also a suicide hotline. Just put it on there because I feel like it's important in my world that everybody knows what that is. And then if there's questions or comments or you need to get either one of us, we are here and we're available for any support that anybody needs. Thank you. Any questions that you want me to answer right now, imminently?
Again, I'll pull up that. Thank you, Michelle and Edie, very much for that presentation. And I will, I've pulled up the list. So if you have any questions, will you raise your hand? I see Christy.
Oh, I do want to mention that I had this really cool YouTube video that a music teacher in an elementary school did on YouTube. And I really wanted to show that because she's like, I wrote this song about COVID, and then she just screams in the beginning, but Mark was like, I'm like, yeah, I get it. So I just wanted to know I was going to start with that. So go ahead. I'm sorry. Who's going to go for Heather? Can you call
Michelle, that's not completely fair, but you can share that if you want. Now that
I'll save that for next time.
You could send us the link. I remember when that came out, that provided a good laugh for people during some of the hard times. Yes. Thank you. Yeah, I can. So I have Christy and then Ingrid.
Okay.
Quick question, because I thought that was a great presentation. And even tonight, if you saw in the public comment, was a plea from a teacher that the district needs more mental health providers, and so I guess that's my question to you is, with all the wonderful stuff you just listed and all the things that are available, what is lacking? What do we need? That doesn't mean we can access it, but what do you feel that we don't have that we need?
Time,
that's what everybody says.
What do you say, time?
Say time. Give me a kidding.
So what I would say we need is not what we need necessarily as a school. What we need is a community, but that's across the board. Right now, there are not a lot of we have like a mental health crisis with this, and there's not enough workers to cover the crisis for everybody. So I don't think it's just specifically our school doesn't have enough supports. Like I was looking for somebody to do eating disorders. Who's a good clinician for an eating disorder? They're few and far between right now, and people have waiting lists, and the clinicians also need to set their limits or they're going to burn out, and we don't want that. So it's not, I don't feel necessarily that we don't have them in the schools. I feel like it's hard right now for anybody to find some openings in the mental health field because everybody is full and everybody is needing what they need right now. Would you agree, Edie?
And to, yes, and to add to that, Michelle, it's very important for client counselor fit. And oftentimes I may find an excellent therapist that's needed for the student or the family, and then they don't take main care, or they don't take the family's insurance, or something like that. So that is also one of the barriers as well.
And one of the barriers also, I think, is that sometimes people feel like if you say, hey, have you considered going to talk to a counselor? Well, there's nothing wrong with me. And I'm like, well, it has nothing to do with being wrong with you. Sometimes everybody just needs support and a little, I tell the kids, sometimes you need somebody outside your box to open a door and give you another opinion. Because it just gives you somebody else to say, hey, have you thought about this? And sometimes you go, oh yeah, well, I thought about that. You know, it's hard in school because we're a small island in a community and a lot of people know everybody for a long time. And to find somebody that doesn't know your story is important. And Edie's right, it is sometimes fixed, or sometimes it's, you know, I say to parents, you know, can you call these people? Can you follow up? And they don't. And so that's hard. So.
All right, thank you. I have Ingrid.
So Edie, you mentioned that now that the virtual nature of services now has allowed you guys to have access to people that you wouldn't have had before that are further afield. Do you see that continuing after, you know, the pandemic is over?
I think it will in some respect. I do.
I do too, because I think that if you can do it virtually and you find somebody that works for you and you can do it in the privacy of your own home and not have to travel and not have to worry about a snow day. I mean, there have been some positives about that. And I think that definitely is one of them. I think people are still full across the board, but I think I agree with you, Edie. I think it could be something that keeps going.
Thank you, guys. Are there any other questions?
Maria?
I'm raising my hand, sorry.
Right.
Yeah, thank you so much for that presentation. I kind of joke I have a freshman, but I always joke that I'm actually a freshman too, because especially after this year, even though I've been on the school board for a long time, I can't answer most of my freshmen's questions about things because we haven't had a normal year and I have no, you know, I don't have any clue either. So I email like the last person who emailed me from the high school is like who gets like the next email from my question. So the reason I use that is I think this year highlighted a couple things from just what I've seen from my fellow parents of freshman kids and maybe others, is that maybe families or students that never would have crossed their mind that they needed to speak to someone, or they didn't realize it, but somebody close to them realized it. And so the next part is like, how do you get that help? And so then I go to myself, who's like, again, I'm like a freshman. I don't even know how to get around the high school, really. You know, how do we continue to get this information out to parents? You know, sometimes you only pay attention to the things you think that are like relevant to you, and then you realize you didn't pay attention to things that actually are going to be relevant to you in like the next year. So I guess what I'm getting at is, other than just doing all these fantastic presentations, like if you're a parent of a student or know someone that needs to reach out to someone and you don't even know, you know, you haven't seen the range of services that we have at the high school, what is the quick and dirty way to figure out, you know, how to do that, and also kind of how to do it confidentially, because there may be, and there is sometimes stigma, even getting to the point of speaking with your child or your friends, you know, your child's friend about it, getting to the point of them giving you a yes. And then you're like, oh my God, I don't even know who to ask. You know, maybe I'll just ask the last teacher that like I had a connection with in the 10 minutes, like my kid's been in school this year, you know? So what is the quick and dirty way to kind of get those, you know, get us connected with your services?
So I want to say in some ways, you know, the selective mentality of I only listen to what happens to me, that's a senior in high school. So you're good. You've already gone 4 years in that amount of time. So you've got that. And what I also would say is call us, call me, call Edie. You know, if you have a high schooler, call any of the guidance counselors, call the guidance office. I tell parents, call me. I have parents that call me all the time. I had a parent call me the other day and they said, I can't give information about somebody else's child to somebody else. So, you can't call me and say, tell me about Emily Squadro. I can't, because that's confidential. But if you want to call me and say, Michelle, I'm really concerned that Emily's getting drunk every night and hanging out with this 28-year-old boy who's got 6 kids by different women, I don't know what to do, then I would say, thank you for that information. And I'm going to follow up and do my thing. I want to meet up with Emily. I might, call her mom and say, listen, I'm just hearing some chatter. There's some stuff going on. Have you checked in with your kid? All within a confidential means, but we get phone calls all the time. So bottom line, call us, call any of the guidance counselors at the high school. And if I don't have the answer, I will find out the answer and know where to send you for the most part. But we've been doing this for a while. So for the most part, I can be like, okay, you need to call this, you need to call this, you need to do this. I'm worst case scenario gal, so I triage. So I start with, okay, do we need to call Department of Human Services? Are they safe? Do I need to call the police? We've done all that. And so even if you just have a worry, or if you have a bunch of parents that just want to talk, that's okay too. We can do that. We can offer supports. Our job is to help you guys navigate this. And as a first-time parent, you are a freshman. It's very different. Talk to people on your board who have had children come through. It's like the first kid you keep really clean, and the second kid you're handing to the greasy worker, like, because you don't care, because you're looking for change. You get to know the routine, you get to know what's going on, and it does get easier, but it is very scary in the beginning because it is unknown, and you're letting your kids go when they come to the high school, and there's older kids and more kids and different kids and a lot of things going on. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I just think moving forward, I remember your presentation at the step up night, or the freshman, before you became a freshman night. It'd be so great to just keep, especially what we know, keep these connections in the forefront in a lot of things we do, and not just burden on you, but also as board members and as parents and teachers and administrators, to remember that this is a bigger piece than we probably ever hoped it would be, but it's a super important piece, and it is going to attach to kids that never thought they would need it, and parents too. So thank you.
And the one of the things I would just say, and I'm not going to keep going because I know you guys have a full night and Christy wants to get to bed before midnight. But I'm just saying, I'm feeling for you. But what I'm also saying is we're all here for the kids and for the staff, but know that if you've got kids in your home, you've got friends of kids, and sometimes we end up parenting each other's children. And that's very important. Those relationships, to feel like they have an adult they can talk to, and kids will tell you things or tell me things. And I'm thinking, okay, well, they'll tell you things that, kids have told me things that I never would have told my mother. But, it's like they need to tell somebody they trust, and you need to figure out how to help them. And so just be aware that we're all in it together, and that your friends' kids might need supports just as much. And it's okay to, I get a lot of, please don't tell anybody I'm calling, but I do that a lot with parents. No problem. I can follow up, call them down, check on something else, and skirt around the issue and deal with whatever's going on. So that's a possibility. So if you have more, Carrie, do you have a question?
I have Carrie, and then we'll move it on.
Okay, cool.
Thanks.
There's the button. Okay, thank you. I want to say thank you to Edie and Michelle. I had asked for some information on this, and I appreciate Mark for you pulling together some folks to do the presentation, or whoever facilitated that. And for me, it was based on a conversation that I had with a Tremont teacher saying, I'm having a hard time getting all my teaching in because I'm trying to help these kids with, these middle school kids with their anxieties and their concerns. And, they keep bringing the conversation around to this. So it sounds like there's a lot in place at the high school level, but other than the guidance counselors and the nurses in the schools, and sometimes the guidance counselors aren't even full-time, our nurse isn't full-time in Tremont either. Who's reaching down to the middle school level, and what can I tell that teacher as far as how they can, get some help to for these kids?
All the school counselors they work with students K through 8.
Okay.
So they are in classes, and they also see kids individually as well. Sometimes we have interns. I know for a fact that Tremont currently has a wonderful one right now. I had an intern last year that could also help me with groups, developing resource lists, and also seeing students. And it comes through these multiple pathways. I like the fact that it's not just one way or you have to qualify to see myself or one of the counselors. It often will start with our school nurse or a teacher. A parent may reach out to the teacher. We've had a few new families come into the area this year. I think all of our schools have, and they know the teacher, and that's about it. And they might say, I really don't know who to reach out to at your school. And then they will get them in touch with myself or Carol Rosinski, who's our school counselor at Connors Emerson.
And I also think to let teachers know if they're having stress or worry, they need to let their administrators know and say, hey, can I get some supports? Can I get some help? Who else can come in and help me or come up with some ideas? I mean, I certainly think we can share resources whenever necessary. We don't want anybody to feel like they're not equipped. And it's hard right now because kids have so much anxiety, and the staff and the parents have anxiety, and you know, what kind of things are available. I would certainly check with their administrator and then bring it back to the crisis team, because I think there's a whole bunch of us that can add supports however they need.
Yeah, Michelle, that's what I was going to say to Carrie is, you know, this presentation is very helpful because now you've sort of seen some of the other actions or items that are in place, like at the high school, but across the district. And then I think probably bring that discussion to your local unit and, you know, find out what you can either implement there, or like Michelle said, take it back to the crisis team.
And like the Lana Panley training we did on mindfulness and social emotional wellness, there was only 6 staff from the high school, and the other 30 something were from the K-8 schools.
Good.
So,
and this presentation is going to be available for people to view
I
afterwards.
was just going to say, yeah, we're going to attach it to the agenda, and obviously if people need access to that, it'll be there as part of this agenda. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Edith and Michelle, very much for your time and for the presentation. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
thank you very much. Have a good night.
You too. All right, I'm going to move it on to Julie for her update.
Good evening, everyone. Take a deep breath. I'm going to be very short. You have a lot to discuss later on. I just wanted to let people know that of a couple of things that are going on for students and for kids from the district perspective. And then I'm going to conclude with an extremely short data snapshot so that everyone can see what is and isn't happening. So first I want to say we did the 7th grade read despite great odds in the fall, and Abdi Iftin did virtual visits and they read his Call Me American. And I didn't know if we were going to be able to do any of our other grade level wide opportunities, but we're going to be doing a 5th grade outdoor safety training with Camp Beechcliff this coming Friday for 5th graders. And I'm really excited that we're going to be able to pull that off again with all of the protocols and safety protocols in place, and we won't mix pods. The principals have been unbelievable in working with me to make sure that we can offer this to our students. And 6th grade is doing a virtual anti-bullying program with Next Step. And I want to thank Edie actually for finding this person who just seemed to really, really connect and click with the 6th graders at Connors Emerson. And then we've been able to work with Cheyenne to make sure that they can come and work with the other schools remotely. This is one of those things where remote has made it possible to do this. And if Cheyenne had to come travel to each place, it would be impossible. So I'm glad that we've been able to at least make sure that some of those conversations are happening in a really focused and intentional way. Speaking of mental health, there's several people around the district, and many of the people on the board have mentioned issues around, technology dependence and mental health. And there is a group that's going to get together for 3 times to really take a look at our policies, to take a look at some resources for parents, and to take a look at some resources for teachers. We will be putting out our instructional grant applications in mid-May, which is same time that we usually do. There's several professional development opportunities that are coming up around Touchstones, which is teaching students how to talk with one another, math consults, and I'm continuing to put out opportunities to learn more about anti-racism. we have gotten these spring assessment windows, and I put those in the newsletter that I think Selena sent out to all of you. I'm very excited that the Tremont and Southwest Harbor pre-K conversation is moving forward, and we're going to be moving to parent events and information events right after the break on Tuesday the 27th and Tuesday May 4th. And the big thing that I'm going to be working on with principals over the next little while is what we're calling back on track plans, which will be the way we're going to conduct our annual needs assessment. We'll bring back to local boards how Title I funds are being proposed to be used, as well as other federal funds. And their back on track plan will include things like, or might include things like summer school, things like changes in staffing, things like changes in schedule, things like using staff differently. We know that despite what I'm going to show you, we do have students who are going to need some extra help and extra connection. And we know that in order to make sure that everybody is successful, we're going to want to provide those, and that each school is going to need to do that differently because they have different staffing and different sizes and different capacities. So Josh, I'm going to show you just an NWA snapshot. It's really short. It's a district-wide view. I have been doing a more localized view of this with some of the boards at local board meetings. I would say that it's almost getting old though. So this is from the NWA mid-year, and it's looking at growth from the beginning of the year to mid-year. And I will say that we will be doing another set of NWAs as well as assessments for younger students and end-of-year writing prompts and reading assessments, math assessments, and we'll have a much more complete picture at the end of the year, and that'll be folded into the needs assessments that I spoke about earlier, which will be completed with the principals and the leadership teams or the RTI teams or both. So if you could give us the first slide, Josh. Again, this is only grades 3 through 8. This is all of grade 3. The green is the mean that our students in that grade achieved in the winter. And the orange is what the national mean is. So you can see that there's a little, our third grade is catching right up, but so not the same picture that we saw in September, really coming along. You see grade 4 and grade 5 are right at the mean. Grade 6 is right at the mean, and then you start seeing our kids pull away some. Our 7th and 8th graders in math have also recovered in terms of growth. So math is an area where there was a little more concern in the fall, and our teachers have been doing a great job of doing math instruction, and kids have been growing and learning. And I'm really pleased that the math workshop model that we've been using seems to be really working in the K4, in some cases to K6. If you go to the next slide, please. This is the picture for reading. Again, our kids are in blue, and the winter mean for NWA nationally is in yellow. You can see that our kids tend to be above the mean, and they continue to be above the mean. And that's, again, we're talking about a mean. That means that it's an average of all of our kids. That means that we know that there are some kids who need some additional supports. But as a group, there is no concern for dramatic or drastic learning loss that's happening. And I just want people to see that. And I want people to know that our kids are okay and they're resilient, and we're going to support them to get back on track. Next slide, please. So this is we did a very conservative estimate, and I fully expect that these are going to be higher when we get to the actual end of year. But these are our predictions for the percent who are on track to meet growth. And these are not that different than what we see in a normal year. And you can see that different groups have different relative strengths, I mean, and that's true of different groups on a micro scale at each school, and then, across the district. Would I like to see more kids who are on track to meet their growth target, or who have already met the growth target or exceeded it? Absolutely. But I really am confident that we're going to see higher percentages here when we look at the end of the year assessments. Next slide, please. So I know people are really concerned, like, how does this year look in comparison with past years? So here's grade 5, current grade 5, going back to fall 18 when they were in 3rd grade, and then 4th grade, and then 5th grade, and then fall, and then 5th grade, and then winter. Those are the points you're looking at. I know it's hard to see because our kids are continuing on the track that they were on pretty much. So the green is our district. Orange is NWA math. You can see that this group came closer to the mean in the fall to winter. Okay. And then our district reading is staying far above the district reading, the national reading in that group. But you can see that group's trajectory is continuing, and there's no huge fall off when you look over time at that same group. It's a little bit of leveling, and I think we can get that back on track. The next picture is of grade 6. Josh, next slide.
It's there.
Oh, it is there. I'm sorry. I didn't see the change. The lines all look the same unless you look really closely. This group has an interesting cross. If you can see, they've leveled out with reading, and we are seeing in some of the middle school classes some leveling out in reading and really good growth in math, whereas we see the opposite in 3rd and 4th. But again, the differences aren't so huge, and you can see there's no big cascades of any kind. And I think you have to remember that actually this group is a very small group, so every kid is counting for more than 1 percentage point because it's not even 100 kids. Remember, we can only show you the kids that we actually have scores for those 4 times. So you're not talking about your entire group, but you are talking about the trajectory of that group. Grade 7. Again, this grade leveled out a little bit between fall and winter in terms of reading, but if you can see from fall 18, fall 19, fall 20, they are going up and up and up. And with math, they're continuing to go up and up and up. And even with their reading, they are far, far above the national mean. I hope people can see this because it's really important. There's no big tailing off. We're going in the right direction. And grade 8, which is the last chart I have here. And grade 8 is absolutely flying in terms of math. And again, leveling out just like grade 7 a little bit in terms of reading, but had already made a lot of gains and was way above the mean. And I think will, like I said, continue to get back on track. So anyway, that's all I have to say. And thank you, Josh, for doing the slides. And I'll take any questions. That's just a snapshot.
Thank you, Julie, very much. And are there any questions? Just raise your hand on the board, please, and I'll call you. All right. Well, thank you, Julie, very much. I appreciate that. All right, I'm going to turn it over to you, Ingrid, for the restructuring group report.
Okay, thanks, Heather. So Mark sent out to all of you a memo that kind of outlined everything, and then we have created an executive summary that I'm going to read, and then you guys can ask questions at the end of that.
So can I just also interject here? This is a report out, and yeah, we can have some questions probably clarifying. I think there's a lot of information that I think people will hear and then need to digest, and we'll make sure that we put it on for a future agenda item for a further discussion.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
So for newer members, we thought it was important to give a brief history about the district over the past 14 years. In 2007, Governor John Baldacci signed a law changing the structure of education across the state and forcing districts to consolidate with neighbors with the hope of creating 24 regional centers. Communities across Maine were concerned about losing local control, schools being closed, and being forced to join regional centers with different educational priorities. Our school boards and central office administration spent significant time reviewing different district structures in an attempt to protect MDI area schools. We did not want to be swept up in a new regional center that likely would have been based in Ellsworth, where we had very little voice in how our education system worked. Rob Lebo, our superintendent at the time, recognizing the problems with the older union structure MDI was operating under and the restrictive nature of the traditional regional union model being pushed by the state, created and advocated for an alternative structure called Model 5. Model 5 took the best pieces of both our union structure and the RSU structure and created a structure that was more efficient and manageable. Ultimately, the school board chose to become an AOS structure, virtually the same structure we were operating under before the governor's mandate, and the DOE eventually approved that request. The AOS structure did not address the cumbersome nature of doing business that Rob had outlined. In a recent conversation that I had with Rob, he said, I looked down the road 20 years and knew the AOS model wouldn't be sustainable. So we're coming up on that 20 years, right, of his projection. For years, we have been consistently hearing from essentially all of our administrative leaders of our schools, and before them, Kelly Sanborn, Howard Coulter, and Rob Lebo, that our structure is inefficient, cumbersome, and constraining. Our subcommittee took into account past and present conversations as we crafted this new organizational proposal that we think will best serve our schools and students well into the future. Our goal is to achieve greater consolidation of functions while retaining a degree of local control at the elementary school level. After discussing options, it appeared that a regional school unit model with local school committees would be the best vehicle for achieving our objectives. The process for creating the structure is fairly straightforward. In a sequential fashion, each town school committee that has an interest in participating files a notice of intent with the Commissioner of Education. Then the school boards form a reorganization planning committee with equal community representation. The planning committee develops a plan for the new structure, which is sent to the commissioner and then finally voted on by each town. The reorganization plan for the new structure must specify the size, composition, apportionment, and method of voting of the governing board. State rules allow for a variety of methods to be used when determining governance, and these are outlined in the memo that Mark sent you on Friday. The subcommittee recommends utilizing the model the AOS members currently use. This method allocates the number of votes each community has based on population. Local school board members would be elected in the same manner as today, and each local board would have a defined number of votes at the district level. The local school board would still have significant responsibilities, including screening, interviewing, and recommending to the superintendent candidates for employment positions in the local schools, including principals, teachers, ed techs, and support staff. Creating a budget, presenting the budget to their local communities, and then passing the budget on to the district board for inclusion in the district budget. Management of the local schools would be the responsibility of the local school board, as towns would retain ownership of their buildings under this model. There are 10 core functions that the state requires a regional board to perform. Of the 10 functions, 7 are currently being done by our AOS structure. An 8th essential function will be AOS managed when the new operations director position is filled. The 10 core functions include employing the superintendent, performing business functions, administering special education, overseeing transportation, centralizing curriculum, adopting the regional budget, filing state and federal reports, employing all staff, establishing a common calendar, and policy adoption. The two functions currently not fully managed by the AOS are budgeting and employing of staff. The subcommittee recommends a budget process which starts at the community level and ends with a budget adoption meeting similar to the current AOS and high school budget meetings. The employment of staff would be the biggest change. However, local school boards would be managing the hiring process and recommending candidates to the superintendent, which is the way it is currently done. This change would allow teachers to pursue positions in other schools in the unit without losing their seniority, allow for position changes with greater ease, and make possible better allocation of staff resources. Our committee feels strongly that we can create a framework for this change with the help of teachers and staff that protects everyone's interests and improves the district. The Reorganization Planning Committee must determine in the reorganization plan how costs will be shared among member towns. The high school district and the AOS have existing cost-sharing formulas that could be used as starting points for discussion. Currently, the high school functions as its own district. If we move forward with a regional unit, the law requires it to be included in grades K through 12. In effect, we already have a regional school unit for grades 9 through 12, and one way to think about the creation of a new regional school unit is that it is an extension of the high school model to all grades, except with the delegation of some functions of K-8 school governance to local school committees. The work that has been done to date is a conceptual outline of how a Mount Desert Island regional school system might be structured to meet our goals within the bounds of current law. It is intended to assist board members in considering a regional school unit model. The work addresses some of the key issues in a general way, and if the process moves forward, a number of additional issues will have to be addressed. So that's our report. We're happy to take questions. Please remember that we are not going to have answers to all of the questions because we did not dive deeper into this, and we won't dive deeper into this until we have a sense of how you all want to move forward, if you want to move forward.
Hang on one second, John. Ingrid, would you just give a quick refresher of who is on this committee to everybody, please?
Yes, so it's myself from Southwest Harbor, Carrie Hayes from Tremont, Charlie Ray from the town of Mount Desert, Gary Burr from Trenton, Lily Simis from Bar Harbor, and Tammy Tripler from Frenchboro.
Thank you. And thank you everybody for all the hard work that you've been doing. I really appreciate it. John, I have you for a question.
I just wanted to reiterate my gratitude for the committee taking that jump and coming up with what looks like a practical, doable process, provided the towns are on board. And just taking this step, for me, just takes away a lot of fog and fear. So thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Are there other questions? Marie.
Yeah, thank you so much for the presentation and for taking on this bear. I'm going to ask a question, and you may not know it, but so one of the positive things of this that we've talked about and you reiterated was fewer budgets. We have 11 now, I think, or 9 or something cuckoo like that we spend a lot of time on. But in terms of the outline that you sent, we'd still be working on budgets at the local level. It looks like, I mean, we'd be looking at them, we'd be preparing them, we'd be voting on them, and we'd be sending them up the pipe to be voted on or consolidated into one budget. How does this save us from having 9 to 11 budgets, or does it not?
Well, I think what it does is it saves it on the back end in terms of how Nancy has to be reporting it. I mean, you're still going to have to get into the nitty gritty of how much it costs to run each school, right? I mean, it's not, you still need all that information that's captured at the individual school level. It just means that on the back end, Nancy isn't having to report things 11 different ways to the state. And I guess I would let her speak more in depth on that answer. And we could have, when we have our next conversation, it probably would make sense for her to be here to be able to speak to some of that.
Nancy, do you have anything that you want to add to that right now?
Is she here?
Just trying to unmute.
Yes, if you formed some sort of like an RSU or whatever, you would be uploading everything once to the state instead of 10 times. So yeah, I'd love to talk to Ingrid more about maybe some of the nitty gritty, parts of it. Obviously, they haven't gotten into that yet.
Mhm. Thank you. Are there other questions?
Christy has her hand up.
Oh, sorry, I'm looking at the panelist list. Christy?
All right, I didn't have the little electric hand. And also, I would say to Marie's comment, it would eliminate the vote at the local level on the school board 9 times. The vote would happen one time at a regional level, like the high school vote happens. So we wouldn't have all those, I mean, there would be some input, obviously, but I could see that savings time. My question would be, Ingrid, what do you think the timeline on this could be? Are you looking to, well, there you go. That's all I'm going to say. What do you think what does the committee feel like the timeline is on this? Because there's a lot of, we've thrown this conversation out a few times, and there's like recurring themes that obviously you and I know would have to be addressed in a lot more detail so that teachers and communities would feel comfortable. And so I'm just wondering what you're looking at here.
Well, I mean, I would like for the AOS board, if they're so inclined, to make a decision, in the next month or two, so that this committee so we could start moving forward, right? Like, I mean, we have to set up this reorganization committee. We have to file some stuff with the DOE. I don't know. I mean, if in a perfect world for me, we would be able to do this work and put this to our towns next spring at town meetings. But I don't have a gauge for that. I would want to talk with our attorney about what the length of time the process normally takes. We haven't gotten into that with him yet, because we didn't want to go too far down this road until we had a sense of where everybody was on the issue. The other comment that I would make is that, somebody asked, somebody sent an email in response to the memo asking about cost savings. So we're not gonna, it's not like we make this change and we see this savings, but I think that by making this change, we are not going to find ourselves in a situation where we're having to hire more staff in the central office to do the business of the central office, right? We all know that Nancy does the job of 2 people. When she decides to leave, there's no one person replacing Nancy. We all know that Mark spends probably, 12 to 14 of the 16 nights that you would typically meet in a given month at meetings. What person is going to want to take this job on? And we've seen this, right? So the savings is going to be not having to hire additional staff to do the work of the district. So from my perspective, I think we need to be thinking about this and making a decision about if we're moving forward. If we're not, we just need to understand that it's going to cost us more to do business the way we are, and that we're going to continue to burn out people who work for us.
Ingrid, another point to the savings. I remember several years ago when Bar Harbor and Mount Desert were talking about trying to do some sort of coordination of consolidation with the middle school level. One of the former Bar Harbor counselors started discussing when they combined the police department. And he said, don't go into this thinking you're actually saving money. It's efficiencies that you're developing. And so I think, you're developing those efficiencies. And then to your point too, because you're developing those efficiencies, you might not be hiring more people to be doing the job. I have John and then Todd.
I think efficiencies is really a good word. It's the same number of school buildings. It's probably the same number of staff, with maybe less new hires, if we can share. But the other thing is, in terms of timing, I imagine this will need to be timed somehow with teacher contracts because the organization making the contract will change. I don't know, it's a lawyer thing, but if that's the case, you're looking at the next teacher contract renewal maybe, where that would happen. I don't know.
I think those are all questions that will, yeah, have to be asked. Yeah. Todd.
Thank you. So thank you for that report, Ingrid. And, I truly believe that exploring this, just the exercise alone, is going to yield a lot of insight to the AOS and what we can do in the future. So I'm definitely in favor of keeping this path open. The one question I have is, and we haven't talked about it in a long time, but the middle school, we haven't talked about the whole middle school idea in a while, and I would assume that fits into this somehow and must look similar to the way the high school is. So I don't know if that has come up in your conversations yet.
It hasn't come up in our conversation. Well, I guess we did talk about it during our first meeting, and we just felt that however that moves forward, that will fold into, whatever we create as a structure. Doing this won't prohibit an island-wide middle school, and the island-wide middle school doesn't have to happen before we can make this structure change.
So it seems like that would fold in easily. So that's a good thing. Thank you.
So I don't know if anybody on the subcommittee has anything that they want to add. I mean, this isn't just me. I just happen to be the mouthpiece.
Are there other questions, or again, like Ingrid said, anyone on the subcommittee want to add? Not seeing anything on the panelist list. Oh, sorry, Marie.
Okay, so I'm just going to be the devil's advocate because I want to know, because I know we'll get this question. We see what the local school committee retains for functions. We see what is the benefit to the AOS, which is mostly stuff that the AOS already does, plus the two things. What would be the things that the local school committee would lose for the control that they have right now? Because I think that's an important question to ask. If you could come up with a list of losses or negatives.
I guess if you look at, so of those 10 functions, right, that the regional board has to perform, the regional board is already performing 7, the 8th, which is transportation, will happen when that operations director position is filled. So I guess what I would say looking at that list is that the local budget would no longer be voted on as it is currently at your town meeting and your town ballot, right? There would be a budget meeting like the high school and the AOS. So that's one. And the other one is staffing in some perspective, but the process really, as we've kind of outlined it, is similar or really the same as what happens right now. So I personally don't see what the school board is losing control of. I mean, I'm sure maybe there's something, but off the top of my head, I'm not necessarily thinking about what it is, but maybe one of the other committee members would have a thought on that.
John, I see your hand. I'm just going to see if another committee member wants to speak up for a second.
I'll speak to that for a second. It's Carrie. So I think, when in our discussions, we talked a lot about the things that we know our school boards would want to retain in our local towns. One of those being control of our buildings, one of those being control of who our staff is, and making decisions about our curriculum and that. And I feel like everything that we've looked at through this, we've made sure that those things would stay with the town boards.
Thank you, Carrie. I have John and then Christy.
I guess in theory, the overall RSU board could override what the local board is set for budget, and vote to publish a budget that doesn't follow what the local board said. So that would be a potential downside. I can't imagine that happening, but in theory that could happen. And curriculum's already technically set by the administration anyway, and we discuss it, but it's an administration matter, so that doesn't really make a change.
So let me just speak to that. In an RSU, if for some reason the district or the regional board were to tell Southwest Harbor, you got to cut $100,000 out of your budget, which I don't think would happen because of the collaborative nature and how we do things. But the town of Southwest Harbor could choose to raise that money outside of this process. So you can do things that you want to do in your local school.
All right, thank you. I have Christy.
I was gonna say, I've already sent an email to Ingrid with like 20 questions on it, but I feel like I have a million questions. I have a million conversations I want to have about this, and maybe this is not the right time or place, obviously. And so I'm remembering, and I know maybe you're going to say join that committee, and yes, I would probably love to, but I was going to say, you know, a few years ago, when we started talking about the structure and we're talking about the middle school, and we had that day-long workshop out at Camp Beechcliff, and we divided up into small groups, and we discussed pros and cons and our ideas, and we got back together. I would love to see, like, maybe even before we have this committee, like a process like that where we could all ask all the million questions and come up with the questions and the information that we need, because I'm sure everybody's sitting here like saying, well, I don't want to take all this attention tonight because it's been a long meeting and there's like still so much stuff to do. But I feel like there's so many questions everybody has or want to get into the nitty gritty, and you don't even know all the answers yet, but maybe we could help you come up with all the answers we need to take the next step. So I was throwing out there, like maybe we could go down that road.
I think it's a great idea.
Yep, I think it's a good idea. And I think, yeah, this has to be put on for another conversation. And I think the other thing too is it's a little bit of asking a lot of these questions that will then help that subcommittee as they continue down the road. I have Jessica, and then we'll wrap this up.
You can move on. I was essentially going to say what Christy was going to say. I have a million questions, but I don't want to take any more time right now. So maybe we can set another time.
Yeah, I think it is exactly this kind of topic, that this was a great presentation. It's getting the ball rolling. There's some of us who've been thinking about this and talking about it for 15 years. And then there are others that are new to it. And yeah, those questions need to be asked in the deeper conversation. All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And, thank you to Ingrid, who during the pandemic didn't lose sight of this conversation and said, hey, I'm happy to take this on. So I really appreciate that. So thank you. And to the rest of the subcommittee for all of the work that you've done too. All right, Mark, I'm moving it to the updates from subcommittees. Do we have anything?
I don't know if Julie wants to share anything on anti-racism task force. I do know that they'll be coming to an AOS meeting later this spring, but and certainly I've been updating folks on the work the policy committee is doing. I will be recommending that we stand up an ad hoc subcommittee on calendar, and I'll get into that when we talk about calendar and the rationale behind that. But I don't have anything else. Julie, do you want to add anything around? No, I think we're good, Heather, unless the board has any questions or unless I've missed anything.
All right. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
And I'll move it to the discussion item, Mark. Draft 2021-2022 school calendar.
I thank you, Heather, so much. I first off want to sincerely thank everyone that provided feedback, and you know, hindsight is 2020, but at the end of the day, the questions that we received from staff, from parents, from board members, community members, what a robust process, and how fortunate are we to be able to have the input and the investment to take a look and drill down into, you know, what's going to be best for our kids and our teachers. I'll try to be succinct and really leave time for questions, but in short, I hope folks see that this iteration, this final recommendation from administration really reflects the fact that we've listened. And I'll take you through those high points. And when I say we've listened, is everybody going to feel that their piece has been heard? Maybe not, but I hope it captures just the scope of what we heard from those different groups. At the end of the day, too, I want to say that this has sparked some conversation around planning time. And I just want to get out in front of that and say that this calendar is not about planning time. Early release is not about planning time. That's sometimes used in conversations, but planning time, time for teachers, which is so important for them to prepare their lessons, to make sure that the focus on teaching and learning is there. They need time to do that. That is important. And planning time is addressed in our collective bargaining agreement. And I know there are folks that have pointed out there's some inequities. That's true. There's inequities in planning time across schools, across our nation, particularly when you start drilling down and you look at elementary and secondary. That's not to say it doesn't need to be addressed and looked at, but the vehicle to do that is through the collective bargaining process, not the calendar. I also want to say that although we've listened, and it's important that we listen, this isn't something that we should do to our communities or do to our students or to our staff. We should do it with them. And I hope that this journey will continue to reinforce that we are listening and we want to make sure that we do things with our communities and our constituents. I also need to say that I am still a strong advocate of a weekly early release for K-8 schools. Although I also know that we need to layer this for the reasons we've talked about already. We need to build capacity, ensure that we don't set up inequities in our communities, make sure that we can work with community partners for those families that do need the resources or the supports or want them. And this iteration, this recommendation will allow us to do just that. So I want to underscore that going in, this is not to say that we do not, I feel we need a weekly early release. I think many of our educational leaders in the district do, but we have to demonstrate why, and more importantly, what that time is going to be used for and how that will be prioritized, and separate that out from the planning time. This should be time and opportunities for teachers to engage with their colleagues, share best practices, review student work, look at data, allow for professional development opportunities for our support staff. All of those things are important, but doing it again in a way that's very thoughtful and builds capacity within our communities. So in sum, this calendar, which is attached to the agenda, I'll try to walk you through the high points. What we tried to do was, we had the original iteration where we had a weekly early release for the K-8s every week. And then we showed an iteration without it. In sum, this really tries to reflect the best of both worlds, if you will, along with the feedback. And so what we're recommending is a monthly early release for the K-8s only. We have done some shifting of some of the PD days. The 5 contractual PD days are in the calendar. So we shifted one out of January into August. So there'll be 3 professional development days in August, or that's the recommendation, and a teacher day on September 1st to prepare for the opening of school. The recommended student start date would be September the 2nd. And then as you cascade through this calendar, you can see we are recommending a weekly a monthly K-8 early release with a dismissal time of noon on Fridays. The reason for the Friday? That's the feedback we got from the community. We listened. This will, I also, for full transparency, want to note that there are 2 pieces in there where you'll see the high school. That's not something new. That's not for the purposes of what the K-8 early releases are designed for. That's for the opening and closing of those quarters or those breaks in the semester to allow for that transition for both students and staff. And that's been something that we've done traditionally for many years. I'm going to let Julie take any questions just around the placement of PD days, both in August and January, because we were very strategic in terms of that. We were also strategic in the placement of the other pieces. This calendar does allow us to obviously have a fixed start date, and we're very confident with contingency or storm days that we'll be able to navigate a hard and fixed end date. Worst case scenario, it's predicted to be June the 17th, but we hope we can navigate a date sooner than that. Julie, is there anything you'd like to add before we take any questions or comments?
I guess just that the 2 January PD days are really based on the very, very positive feedback we got from the K-8 teachers in being able to and the high school to have those 2 full days between the first semester and second semester. Those would not be district days. Those would be days for teachers to meet and plan, finish report cards, get ready for their courses. And the only other thing that I would say, we got many, many responses. Thank you for treating us as professionals. This professional time meant that I was way more prepared for the second semester. I mean, it was extensive. And so there's those 2 days, and then there's the 3 days that Mark mentioned at the beginning of the calendar. There are no other full days taken out of student learning time. The other thing is, people said to us, well, why don't you just do the second Friday every month? Well, the issue is that sometimes because of the way the calendar falls, we tried to space out the Fridays. And we are hoping that we can help everybody to understand that there's 1 Friday a month. Which one is it this month? And people can just check in on that piece. And lastly, we're not, those Friday days, the 2 of them will be for parent conferences during the parent conference weeks like they are now. And they will be building based days. The 2 mid-year days on either side of that weekend, we offered voluntary ed tech professional development both of those days this time. And then that allowed ed techs to be involved with meetings they needed to be, but also to get credits toward their recertification. And that was also very, very well received.
So Heather, I don't know, we can certainly take any questions or comments from the board, but this is not an action item. This is first reading. So I know we'll be having some local meetings with boards, and also, the board can take this up for consideration at the May meeting.
Thank you, Mark. That's actually what I was trying to say, but I was muted. So I appreciate. That's what I was going to say is, yeah, this is a discussion item. So let's open it up for some questions. And I do agree that this should be on the local level agendas as well. And again, I will try and pay attention to the screen, but looking at the panelist list. So if you raise your hand through the program, it's a bit easier to navigate. Carrie.
Just a clarification, Julie, were you saying that 2 months out of this, those early releases for elementary are taken up by student parent-teacher conferences? So they won't be available for?
That's traditionally been the case. Is the teachers in K-8 felt like their parent conferences took more than the 7.5 hours that they're paid for them, in addition to, in the evenings, and after school. And so we started putting in an early release afternoon. And so we cited those early release afternoons for those 2 sets of parent conferences, as is the case now. Teachers could choose to schedule the parent conferences, and I suppose based on building-based decisions, use that time differently. The other thing that the monthly early release will help is that if buildings want to, for example, Trenton's been working very closely with Lana Penley, who Michelle Gertler mentioned, and they've been working with her directly, and having her have time to come on a monthly basis to do that school-based piece that's connected to that school's goals. But to answer your question, yes, the idea would be that they would be during those weeks, and those 2 out of all of the monthly ones would be available for scheduling parent conferences.
So they're losing 2 out of, what is this, 8 opportunities to use that time for the for working with their colleagues and.
Yeah. So, again, yes. And we originally we were going to pilot 4, if you recall. We had 2 before COVID hit and took away the other 2. The idea was to have 4 on top of the 2 that were already there. So basically the proposal isn't that different than what we were proposing for before the pandemic.
Okay. I just don't want to see them lose that time that we're building in. So I think it's a great calendar, and I love to see all the thought that's gone into, listening to what people are asking for. So thank you.
Thanks, Carrie. I have Ingrid.
Sorry. I was just going to say that I like the calendar. I think it's a nice compromise, and I think it's going to be great to have that subcommittee kind of dive into some of the concerns that were raised during this time frame. We want to make sure that we're supporting teachers in the way that they need to be supported, having as much educational time as we can for kids. And so this to me seems like a good way to try to address those needs. And I look forward to a year from now kind of seeing how this worked, if we feel like they need a few more thrown in. So thank you for the work you guys have been doing.
Thank you, Ingrid. Susan Allen.
Internet got tell you my questions, Heather, if I poop out or if you can't hear me. So I had a simple question. I hope they're simple. Can you hear me? I'll email you.
All right. You do that, and then I'll move to Jessica.
I just want to thank you for your attentive work on this, because I think there's such a balancing of needs and desires going on here. And I think that that you've done a really good job. I mean, I think there's more terrain that this subcommittee can cover, but I would just urge us to honor the careful work that's gone into this balancing of needs process here.
Thank you, Jessica. Are there other questions? Let's see, Marie.
Yeah, thank you so much for having advanced information, and also for the work that's been done. And I just don't, a couple of things that Mark brought up at the beginning was that the calendar is not a tool for planning for release. We want to do this with our community, not without, and yet we still need to really figure out a way to address inequities. And I think those are really important things for us to remember. I don't know if we're stuck between a rock and a hard place. I don't know if this is a gray area. I can't quite come up with the right, phrase to figure this out. But we can't on one hand, and I'm not saying we are, but we need to be careful not on one hand to say that we want everything unified as an AOS. But at the other hand, say, we got to let our elementary schools figure out how to get planning time for their, for each community. We've really, if we're, and I also think I question whether or not we'll be able, it makes the most sense to only really think about this in terms of contractual, because contractually where we are and what's happening on the ground is different. So I just think we really need to hear that our elementary schools as we know, in varying capacities and in varying number of faculty and varying number of students and varying needs are telling us that they, need some help. And I think we need to hear that, and we need to figure out a way to bridge the inequities that we are effectively creating and standardizing by doing a really good thing at the high school level. It's not a bad thing what we're doing. It was a thoughtful process. It was an ugly and sticky process, but it came out with a good result. But in doing that good result, it's making a ripple effect, and it's creating some inequities that we cannot just sort of turn our eye, a blind eye to. So I think we need to really think about that and honor that, and hear that we have to put our time and resources to helping to bridge that gap, whatever, whatever way that either our administrators at the local level tell us is a good idea. And that with our communities, we've heard from our communities that weekly half day is very challenging for a number of reasons, but we have some resources in our pockets to figure that out. I think within possibly in this current budget, if not within planning for the next budget. So just wanted to put that out there. We hear all these, we hear these elementary schools asking for this. And as an AOS, I think are obliged outside of contractual obligations to help fix that problem.
Thank you, Marie, for raising that again and keeping it at the forefront. As I've said, I think this is a really important conversation to be having at the local level, and exactly to your point, that some of these items need to be addressed there and have that more intimate conversation there. Susan, I didn't get an email from you, but will you email did you send it to my Gmail?
Where am I? Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you clearly.
Okay, I was just wondering, afternoon programming, was that involved anyway? And then ed tech.
Cool, I think we got the question in before she froze.
Heather, do you want me to address or?
I think
So
that's
the after school programming, we're going to work with our community partners to come up with programming, whether it be the partners we have now or other entities, to provide opportunities for parents and students that may need that, Susan. So yes, we've already started some of that outreach. Julia started some of that, but we will follow up on that. And there is a percentage out there that we know we'll need that. And I think the second piece you cut off, but it was on staff development for, I think, support staff. And yes, is that your question? Yes or no? Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay. So yes, we absolutely will budget for and would want all of our support staff to be included in this. Now, having said that, there are probably a lot of more natural fits for instructional support staff, ed techs and so on. But it goes without saying that our bus drivers, our custodians, administrative assistants, they have professional development needs. It may not as well, and it may not be to the same degree as some of those instructional support staff, but this would provide a vehicle to be able to deliver that. And I think that's a good thing. I don't know if that answers your questions, but I can follow up some more.
Thank you, Mark. I have Christy.
It does. Thank you.
And I don't want to say everything Marie just said, but I totally agree with what Marie just said about planning time. And I think if you all read a letter from Amanda Dyer in the public comment, she made some really good points about there's an element of planning time in our teacher contracts, but planning time and is educational policy, and that is the job of the board. And I think that we have, when we're in contract negotiations, we're talking to teacher association presidents, but we don't have any administration in there, teacher building representatives. Then we have meetings where most of our school board meetings are held with school board members and the administrators, but teachers aren't present. And so I really think we need, when we can all gather around a big table, we need to gather around a big table and have this conversation with administrators, teachers, and board members, because I think, like Mark just said, like, this is about professional development, and this is about collaboration, and this is about planning time, and this is about personal. I don't even think we've defined what all those things are, and maybe teachers don't even know what all those different things are. People are adding up minutes and multiplying minutes and saying it's all crazy. And I just think if we could all be in one room together and we could really hash out some of these definitions and what we're talking about here. I feel like we're always going around this circle and then we never resolve it. And so I just think we could do a better job of pulling the key people into one room.
All right, thank you. All right, so I encourage this topic to be on the local board meetings. And this will be under future agenda items. And thank you, Mark, and to all the administration for all of the hard work that was done in trying to come up with a compromise and knowing that, a deeper dive into this topic needs to be done. So I appreciate that.
Thanks for your support and thanks for your patience. Appreciate it.
All right, moving on to action items. We have the election of school board officers, chair, vice chair, and secretary. There have been a couple of people that have expressed an interest in being chair and vice chair. I think I'll just cue it up. Christy LaSquadra has said that she would be chair, and Ingrid Kashmar said that she would be vice chair. Todd, I believe you are currently secretary, and I have no idea whether you wish to continue that role.
If there's somebody who wants it.
It's like a once-a-year job, and then it's institutional knowledge, I think, is the role.
I'm tempted to nominate somebody else after this long list of laundry that we just went over tonight.
Oh, you are?
I can stay as secretary if there's nobody. Absolutely.
And I could fill in if you really want to get out, Todd. I'm good either way. I'll be.
Oh, is that Dwayne?
Yeah. Sure. I nominate Dwayne.
Well, if somebody wants to make a motion for the slate, we can go about it that way.
I'll make a motion to nominate Christy as AOS chair and Ingrid as vice chair and Dwayne as secretary.
Second.
Carrie, thank you. I am going to go about this the verbal way. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Those opposed? Nay. It was unanimously approved. Thank you, everybody.
Heather.
Mark.
May I speak, please?
Sure.
I just want to take a moment to acknowledge, Heather, that you have served our communities for over 12 years. From April 2007 to May 2013. That was your first stint.
Mm-hmm.
And then coming back in May 2015 to now. That 12 years of service includes serving on the Mount Desert Elementary School Board, on the Mount Desert Island High School Board, on the AOS board, in chair roles in many of those, and on the Board of Trustees. And that doesn't even begin to talk about your advocacy and work for scholarships in the Northeast Harbor Library and all the other things you've done. And Heather, I just have to say, it's been an honor and a privilege to serve as your superintendent. I want to thank you for what you've done for the hundreds of kids and staff. You are a class act and an amazing, amazing person. And we owe you an incredible debt of thanks. Thank you for your service.
They unmute and clap.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That was very nice. It's been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed it most of the days.
Heather, I just want to echo that you have, particularly the last 2 years, led us through some really super challenging times with grace and with compassion, and I've always been impressed with how you handle difficult conversations that we have had, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I will miss everybody, and I was so hoping that we'd have an in-person meeting before it ends, but I guess I'll just have to see everybody around town, around the island in different capacities. So thank you. All right. Shall we move on to the second reading and adoption of policies? Mark, do you want to?
Yeah, so this is the second reading. Pleased to take any questions if the board would like to do these one at a time, or however you'd like to proceed in the aggregate. But and there are several members of the AOS board and administration that have been part of the review and the development of these policies. So I'm happy to take any questions, or I don't know if you want me to go into these in any detail, Heather, but however you'd like to proceed, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, thank you. There hasn't been any other change since the last
No,
time we had the first
no.
reading when we went into it. So yeah, I'll just take if there are any questions that anybody has after that first reading. Carrie, I see your hand.
Yeah, and I apologize if I've read this wrong. I looked at these, several weeks ago, but I was reading it that the chair has a right to offer motions, and I'm wondering if that's new, because I don't feel like that's the way that we have been working in the past. And I know it's not the way I've worked on other boards.
Which policy are you referencing, Carrie, please?
Oh, good question. I took notes.
Is it school board meetings?
I would assume it's probably school board meetings, yes.
Let me take a quick look. And while if there are any other questions, but I don't recall that coming up. And I mean, certainly, and I'm not completely sure what you're referencing, but the chair as an entity always has the opportunity to address motions, but I'm not
right
exactly
here
sure what you're referencing. So if we want to pull that, if that's the policy and the board wants to pull that one out, we can do that. I wouldn't want anybody to think, we're pushing anything through. So if the board wants to pull a policy out, we can for a second review.
Hold on one second, Mark. I think Jessica, did you locate it?
Yeah, it's right here under board officers at the top of page 2. It says put motions to a vote and announce the result. But I think that means they can ask for a motion, not actually do the motion, right?
That is my interpretation.
Yep.
Oh,
And yeah, and that's been typically our practice too. Christy, I see your hand and I'm wondering, is it in relation to this? And we just lost Christy, I think.
I just Googled Robert's rules. Oops, sorry, Carrie.
It sounds to me like I was reading it wrong, and so I appreciate the clarification.
Yep, and Christy, what were you going to
I was
say?
just going to say, I just Googled Robert's rules because I know that is our practice. And just so if you all know, it says that board chairs can make motions, but they should remain impartial if they can. So I don't think it's against procedure for the board chair to make a motion, although it's not a good practice.
Okay.
Yeah, generally, the way it's worked, my experience with all the boards is that not only have board chairs generally refrained from doing that, and I can't recall in the 5 years that happening, but even with votes, the board chair is generally the last person to cast their vote. So, I think just my observations that we have very well-run school boards and have not seen any problems in that area at any of our boards.
Okay, thanks, Mark. John?
Just saying that I've seen it done in selectmen meetings when things are a little dysfunctional. That the chair will, just to get the conversation going, will make a motion. So I think by Robert's rules, it can happen. It's just sort of not the standard.
Yep. Okay. All right, thank you. Are there any other questions? Marie.
The one about email communications, I know we've brought this up again, but I'm sorry, we brought this up previously, but now I can't find it, but school board use of email and other electronic communications. In that one, it actually says that we should be using the email address as administered by the school unit. And so I'm just want to keep that on the forefront, that when's that going to happen? Just, it would be nice to have an email that could separate all our communications, because it's good practice and it's in the policy, apparently, if we're about to, next time vote on it.
Yep. Mark?
Yeah, if I may, thanks, Marie. I'll work with Josh, but I don't see that as a problem. And I might suggest, that could happen pretty quickly, but maybe the best transition is that we institute it for the start of the school year. But if somebody has one that they want sooner, we can work through that. But I'll work with Josh to make sure that we can provide all of our board members and our trustees with a school sponsored email link. Okay.
Mark, I think that's probably a really good goal, is the start of the new school year. You'll have some new board members coming on, and then, after that, it would just be subsequent every time you get someone new. But again, if there's someone sooner, and I think that it's, I think one, it's important not only because it's now potentially going to be in this policy, 2, from a FOIA situation, but 3, I've had numerous spamming of my emails over the course of the time as being chair. And so, to keep it separate is I think really important. Jessica Stewart, I saw your hand, but you're going in and out.
I took it down because Mark, I was going to just say the policy committee had been talking about this issue of doing emails and so forth.
Okay, great, thank you. If there aren't any questions, and if it's the will of the board to move the slate, I will take a motion.
I'll make a motion to move the slate as presented.
Thank you, Todd.
Second, Christie.
Thank you, Christy. Any further questions or comments on any of the policies? Okay, not seeing any hands. I will put this to a verbal vote. All those in favor, aye.
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 Thank you. Those opposed, nay. It is unanimous that the slate passes.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Okay, so other business. Mark, do we have any?
I have nothing, Heather, other than the items that you mentioned to bring forward in May.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, moving to future agenda items, I have calendar structure committee or restructure committee. Julie, will you have anything in particular to present then, or?
No, we just have to vote on the fiscal agent of Bar Harbor for each of the local boards and all that kind of thing, but nothing other than my short report. June is when the anti-racism task force will be.
Okay.
And I don't know how much data we will have done by then, but we will do as much as we can for then and do a more complete picture in the fall.
Okay. Christy and then Marie.
We haven't really addressed this yet, but now that looks like I'm up here, I think we need to add hiring of a superintendent to our May agenda.
For the superintendent search, yep.
We have to begin that discussion, I think, pretty soon.
And just for the rest of the board to know, I intentionally did not address that for the remainder of my term, because I just felt that that was going to be a decision that the whole board, and I think the new chair really needed to sit and have that discussion. Marie, did you have something else to add?
Yeah, I just, I don't know if it's the next board meeting or if it's June, but I feel like, I don't know if it's an AOS thing, but anyway, some sort of a report or looking ahead to what the fall is going to look like. Some sort of a, I don't know. We just need, I know we're very bogged down. We have some very heavy issues that we're working on, that we're working probably longer than we typically would. But if we are not going to have board meetings this summer, maybe we will, I don't know. We haven't stopped. Why stop now? I think it would be good to hear what building principals need, what the AOS is thinking, and how things might look different to prepare the community and ourselves for upcoming resources, especially with granting money that may be coming through.
Okay, great, thank you. So I've jotted all those down and I'm sure we'll get in the minutes. Carrie.
Thanks. I know I asked this earlier in the year and just curious if anything's happened with it. The middle school committee was something that I was hoping we might get a report on when that was going to start up again.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you. All right, next meeting is Monday, May 10th. And Ingrid or Christy and, oh, I guess maybe Ingrid still for that May meeting. We'll figure out the timing of the agendas. And then I will take a motion to go into executive session pursuant to 1 MRSA subsection 4056D contract negotiations.
So moved. Jessica?
Second, Todd.
Thank you. And I'm going to do a verbal. Those in favor, aye.
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 Opposed, nay. It's unanimous that we're going into executive session at 8:23.